This is a story tonight about how Argy, the CL-28, met Thomas the tank engine. Well, everybody knows about Thomas, but not everybody knows about the CL-28. The CL-28 was an anti-submarine plane that was built in the 1950s in a plant called Canadair in Montreal. It's a very famous plant. That's where they built an awful lot of the Sabres for the Korean War. He's built thousands of them there, and the Sabre was sometimes looked at as being the best fighter jet of that whole period. It was certainly superior to what the MiGs that were flying against. Anyway, not only was it built there, but the designs for the CL-28 and a number of other planes, like the CL-144, which was a swing-tailed cargo plane, they were actually designed there, and they were also partly designed by your grandfather, who worked there as an engineer. Well, how did Argy and Thomas meet? Well, it all started when Connor invited Thomas over for a visit. It had been quite a while since Thomas had been over, and he was really interested and really wanted to see Ottawa and his very dear friend Connor again. So when he got the call from Connor, he said, "Oi, that's super. I'd love to come over for sure. I've just got to clear it with my boss." So he went to Sir Topham Hatt and said, "Sir, I got an invitation to go and see Connor again, and I would really like to take some more holiday time." "Oh, but you were just there a little while ago, weren't you, Thomas?" "Yes, but I'd love to go back again. Besides, it's summertime and it's so pretty, and I'd like to go to the aviation museum that he was talking about in his phone call. It would be so nice." "Well, I guess if you want to go that badly, go with my blessing. How long will you be gone?" "Oh, not too long, maybe 2 weeks." "Okay, we'll see you back in 2 weeks' time." Well, Thomas didn't take very long getting ready, and of course he did find out that his best friend for ships, Tidy, was back in Le Havre again. And when he phoned him up, actually he decided he wouldn't phone him. He thought, "I'm going to use the old telegraph that's here and see if I can get a hold of him." So he went to the station, and there was the telegraph key sitting there, and he turned it on, dee-dee-dee-dee, and he started sending a telegram to Tidy in Le Havre, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. Well, you would be so surprised to see what happened at the other end of the line when Tidy realized he was getting of all things, a telegram. "Oh, I haven't had a telegram for so long." He nearly jumped out of the water. There was a huge splash, and everybody around got wet. There was just, the baby carriages were swamped with water, and there was fishes swimming around in them, and the little kids were screaming, and the mothers were, they were up in arms, and the grandparents were saying, "Oh, what a, c'est terrible." But anyway, it all settled down, and when he decoded the message in Morse code, he thought, "Yes, I'd love to go over. Take him over. Let's do that." Well, he went over and picked up Thomas at Tidmouth Docks. Is that where it is?
I think it's called Brendan Docks, yes.
Brendan Docks. Yeah. Brendan Docks, yes. Well, off they started. It was a beautiful day, and they were flying along. They were just going through the waves, just splashing along at a great rate. And all of a sudden, Thomas looked up and said, "Oi, I think there's a plane overhead." And he looked up, and he saw there was this big plane. It was very high up, and it was circling round and around. And he thought, "Oh, what's that?" Well, when Tidy looked up, he said, "My goodness, that's very unusual. Are they following us? What's happening?" Well, there was only one way to find out. They had to phone Sea Control, find out who was up and who was following them. So they got a hold of Sea Patrol. They're saying, Tango Foxtrot Charlie Bravo. Well, this is Tidy. We're wondering about a plane that seems to be just following us or tracking us or doing something like that. Could you find out what it is? And a few minutes later, they came back and, Tidy, this is Ocean Control here again. We've found out that this actually is Augie flying over you. What? Who's Augie? Said Tidy. Oh, I know, said Thomas. Why, that's the plane we were going to see. But how come it's flying? Well, I've got to phone Connor. So luckily he had his sea cell phone on, and he was able to call from the sea, from the ocean, and call all the way back to Connor.
And he called me.
And he called Connor and said, Oi, Connor, there's very strange things happening. Well, I thought I was coming over here to see, to meet and see your friend Augie, but it seems like Augie's following us and flying over us right now. Well, oh yeah, that's right. What I did was when I knew you were coming over, I went to the Aviation Museum and I asked them to take Augie out of mothballs. It still has good engines and can still fly. So they took it out, cleaned it up, dusted it off, filled it up with fuel, and when they started the engine, they started just fine. But isn't that a long way to fly? Oh, not to worry. Augie can fly for 29 hours with a full fuel load and 8,000 pounds of bomb and a crew of 15. It will have no trouble following you. Well, as it happened, they were able to sit down and get very quickly over to the other side of the ocean. There was only 2 days out, and because there was not so much weight on Augie, he could fly around and around, and he lasted 2 days, and he got there and landed at Shearwater just as Tidy was clearing St. George's Island, or is it George's Island?
George's Island.
George's Island, yeah. Well, Connor was very excited.
I was very excited, yes.
And he surprised everybody by going down and taking the Ocean Limited down to Halifax. So when Tidy showed up with Thomas, there he was waiting on the dock.
Yes, I was right there waiting for him.
And Tidy was so delighted to see Connor again, and Connor gave him a big hug, and Tidy gave him a big hug back, and they helped Thomas down off, and Thomas said, that was the strangest trip I've ever had. We have this big plane following us. Oh, it's landed over there, and we're going to say hello to it, and I'm going to introduce you, you said. So you took the McDonald Bridge across, and you Ubered all the way over to Shearwater Base, and there it was, sitting on the tarmac, and there was a big crowd around it because everybody was just flabbergasted to see a plane that they thought had been retired back in the 1980s was still flying, and it had landed there. The newspapers were out and the television crews were out. Everybody was taking videos, and they were doing Snapchat, and they were getting it on Twitter, and there was...
And also taking some selfies.
Yes, selfies, yes, with it too. And, well, when they saw that you and Thomas had showed up, they said, oh, look, there's even some more celebrities. And they ran over and started taking selfies with you and with Thomas. But you slowly pushed your way through the crowd, and you got to where Augie was, and you said, hello, Augie. And Augie said, Connor, it's so good to see you. And who is this you have with you? Well, of course, Thomas was flabbergasted at the size of the plane, because that was the biggest plane that had been ever built in Canada. From start to scratch, yes. And he just sat there and looked at it, the huge wings, and Augie sat down and smiled at him and said, I bet you'd like to go on a flight with me. How about if we fly all the way to Ottawa, and you can then see the Aviation Museum from above in the air, and then come down and take a look at it. And then I can fly you back to Halifax. Well, that sounded like a delightful idea. So both you and Thomas got on board, and Tidy was saying, what about me? What about me? So you looked at Thomas, Thomas looked at you, and you asked Thomas, Thomas, do you think we should take him with us? And you said,
of course.
yes. Tidy, come on over, there's
So I
room
did
for
this,
you.
I did
Yes,
I did this. I
yes,
said,
he
"Come on
gestured
over."
to him, yes. But of course, we've got to realize now that Tidy had taken, of course, all these various machines have had the magic spell that they had that made them look, grow very big or very small. And of course, Tidy got down to the size that it was just your size, and he could just fit comfortably in one of the seats inside the plane. And he was so delighted because they got on board, and he could see all the panels lit up and all the lights going, and you could see the radar going, and he could see they actually put in some new video screens and computers in it.
So
And
they
he was
updated it.
and he was quite interested to see that he could see when they got up in the air. Yes, it was a thrill. He said, "Oh, this is so wonderful. It's been so long since I've been on a plane." And of course, Tidy had never been on a plane. He was hanging on to a seat thinking, "Oh, I know a lot of people are afraid of the ocean, but here we are. Oh, why we're so, how high are we? 35,000 feet and climbing. Oh my goodness, my goodness," he said to himself. That's nearly, what, nearly 6 miles? Oh my. Well, he looked out the window, and all he could see was fields and forests and lakes and streams and cities. It was way too high to see any people. Of course, they were so far away. But in no time at all, they were flying over Ottawa, and the Argy called them on the intercom and said, "Now, so that you can see what the city's like, we're going down to 7,000 feet and take a flyby." So he went there, and they came in the east end, and they flew all around the south, and they went out far as past Kanata and Carleton Place, and they turned around and they started flying back along the river all the way towards the east. And you could see, as they were coming in, you could see the Parliament Hill and Chaudière Falls and all the downtown area, and you could see the beautiful museum of art and of
Gatineau.
nature in Gatineau, and the history museum as well, and flew all the way out and around. And then he said, "Now we've got another surprise coming up to you. We're going to land at the old Rockcliffe Air Force Base." Oh my God. Well, Connor wasn't too sure of this because he said, "They haven't used that for a long time, and it's just small planes." "No problem. The runway's still long enough. And besides, I'm very good at stopping at very short distances. I'll slow way down before I land. And besides, I've told everybody there the control tower is ready, and they're delighted to have me in, and they moved all the little planes off the side, and all the little planes want to meet me too, because they didn't think that I could ever fly again, and I've been sitting there in the museum
For years.
and here I'm up in the air," and they sort of look at me as a kind of a hero. Well, so he flew all the way around, and he went, "Rrrr." So all the little children in the museum, they heard the roar of the engines. They was like, "Daddy, Mommy, what's that?" And they looked at the windows, and they could see this shadow of a big plane going, "Oh." And they said, "What was that? Was that a bird? Or was it a plane? It wasn't Superman, was it?" "No," said their daddies, "it was a plane." They turned around and came back, and the plane went by again. "Rrrr." And the shadow went over one more time, and the little kid said, "I saw it again, I saw it again." So they all ran outside, and they ran outside just in time to see Argy turning around for his final approach and coming down, and he had his flaps up, and he had his wheels down, and he was slowing right down, and he was only flying at about 150 knots, and he was coming in low and slow, and he just cleared the fence, just nearly hit the top of the fence with his tires, and then he landed, and screech, on went the brakes. Well, of course, you could smell the tires burning, and this black mark that was left on the runway. And he was still going, and he was slowing down, but he wasn't going to go, was going to hit the fence, so slowing down, and he stopped 15 feet away from the fence. "Oh," said Argy, "that was close. I'm not sure if I want to do that again." "Well, you've got to get us home," said Tidy, "don't you?" "That's true. I guess if I did it once, I can do it again." Well, you and Tidy and Thomas went in to the museum, and believe me, there was a hullabaloo from the kids when they saw them all. They didn't really know who Tidy was until you explained it to them, and they were just so surprised that they could see the real Titanic walking around them like if it was just back in 1911. It was amazing. Well, course, the people, the staff in the museum would have been so excited by having this event happen that they cleared the planes back, and they put down a big long table, and they had chairs on every side, and they invited all the children and all their parents, and of course Hugh and Tidy and everybody. Tidy was a guest of honor along with Argy, and they opened up the side of the wall. They just rolled the curtain wall back so that Argy could look in, and there he could see all the children having a wonderful time, eating their hamburgers and hot dogs and having cake and juice and singing songs. And of course, at one time, the head of the museum got up and he rapped his glass with his knife, and everybody stopped, and he said, "I'd like to first of all thank everybody here, and I'd like to say that this event we're having is in honor of the last flight of Argy across the Pacific, across the Atlantic Ocean. And not only that, he's brought with him two very special guests, Thomas and Tidy. Thomas and Tidy, please get up and take a bow." And they both got up and they took a bow, and the kids went wild, and they were pounding on the table, and they were splashing their juices, and some of the little kids started crying, and the mother had to say, "Hush, hush," and there, and now, got them all quiet again. Well, Tidy got up and said, "I'm very happy to be here. This museum is fantastic. I can see all the planes here. I know I'll want to stay here for a little time and get to know them all. And I've got to also thank my good friend Connor for inviting me over, and my new friend Augie for flying us here, and of course my very old friend Thomas the Tank for coming with me and in fact initiating this whole trip." And everybody cheered, and you got up and you said, "Well, thank you everybody. This is a wonderful event. This is one of my very favorite museums. I'm just so glad that Argy, who my grandfather helped design and build back in the 1950s, is here among us." And Argy said, "I remember him. His name was Bill Deacon, wasn't it?" "That's right," you said. "I'm surprised you remember." "Oh, I remember him," said Argy. "He was one of the engineers that worked the hardest to try to get everything just right on me. He used to work on the fuselage and designing the cowling and looking at all the parts that had to go around the engine. It was very tricky." Well, the rest of the meal finished, and all the little kids were sleepy, and they were taken home by their mummies and daddies, and the staff came in, and quick as a wink, they cleared everything up and rolled back the planes. And then Connor and Argy and Tidy went around and spent the next 3 or 4 hours talking to all the planes and getting to know them and hear their stories. And my, they heard some very fantastic stories, and some very frightening stories, and some very heroic stories too, because a lot of the planes were warplanes. And
yes, especially Thomas especially wanted to see the Messerschmitt.
Yes, and there it was, the Messerschmitt.
Meshy.
Yes, and he thought, "Oh, I know you. You used to fly over and drop bombs on us, but you missed." And Meshy said, "See, I'm very sorry for doing this, but the war is over, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. It's got too many bad memories." Well, of course, Thomas was a little bit surprised. He said, "Okay, no problem." He said, "Whew, I better not talk to Meshy about that again. He didn't have a very good time in the war, did he?" Well, anyway, after everything was done, and it was nighttime, everybody came back here and had a good night's sleep and met all the critters again. And in the morning they got up and had a wonderful breakfast, and then they headed out to the museum. And this time you said goodbye to Tidy and to Thomas as they got on Argy. And then at the last minute, Argy said, "Well, I'm coming back here. You can come along too." So he said, "You asked me, can I?" And I said, "Sure you can. You're a grown person now. You can go if you want." So he hopped on and he flew back all the way to Halifax with Argy and dropped off Thomas and Tidy. And Tidy said the magic words, and all of a sudden he was a huge ocean liner again. And you waved goodbye to them, and Argy waved back, And off they went across the ocean again. And of course, when you went up in Argy, you went out a little bit way and you followed over, and this time you flew really low over tide. And he waved, and Argy waved, and you waved back. You flew all the way back to Ottawa, and you got here just in time to come and have your nighttime bath and have your story told to you by me. And that's the end of the story.
Great.